I'm not a really huge fan of creature flicks. Might be an unpopular opinion, but it is what it is. Naturally, when I was forced to watch the 28 franchise, I started out skeptically, and I have no shame in admitting that it blew my mind. For starters, it is not a zombie movie series, and the makers are extremely particular to propel this idea. Rather, it depicts a way more nuanced storyline than any regular monster movies, and I was hooked. In the 28 franchise, you have something called the rage virus, which infects people and turns them into soulless, mindless things. I'm not getting into what the rage virus is because we are making a whole other video on that. What I'll do is discuss the infected people and their variants as we saw in 28 years later. So let's begin. The original rage virus infected people. So, the journey of people being inflicted by this weird virus, which makes them uncontrollably aggressive, began with 28 Days Later, released in 2002. Our blue-eyed boy, Cillian Murphy, took the center stage, and honestly, one look at him, and I did not care about where the story goes. That being said, the plot actually did not disappoint, and built a brilliant base about how the rage virus works for the later movies to stand on. We had the infected on the side, who are the antagonists of the franchise, while on the other hand, we had our normal human beings trying to fight them, and most importantly, not become one of them. Coming to how the infection started, this highly contagious virus originated in Cambridge Primate Research Center. As humans, we have always preached about making love and not war, right? Well, that worked out perfectly for the rage virus because it can spread rapidly through bodily fluid. Ironically, humans found themselves waging war again. Once someone is exposed, the virus takes barely 10 or 20 seconds to manifest, after which people begin transforming into grotesque things by vomiting blood, spasming, showing red irises, and an intense display of hostility. The time taken, however, varied in some cases, depending on the amount of fluid one got in contact with. All they know now is to attack and turn uninfected individuals, and once they find a normal person, they would go crazy, physically harming them in a desperate attempt to spread the virus. They don't care who they're attacking: family members, friends, strangers, or even an a-hole of an ex who probably deserved it. Basically, the infected have been stripped off of any higher brain functions. One exception was Donald Harris in 20 Weeks Later. Pre-infection, he was an extremely intelligent person, and once changed, he did get flashbacks of his life before. However, that further aggravated Donald's rage and urged him to attack his loved ones. Moreover, he could even operate basic machinery as an infected. And now, let's talk about how the rage works. No, it does not kill a host immediately. However, since an infected person does not think about basic survival needs anymore, they eventually die due to starvation or dehydration, or become too weak to move and can be easily killed. Moreover, they are not immune to mortal wounds and can be hunted down with weapons like bullets or arrows. Personally, I feel we're looking at a horde of people whose whole minds stopped working properly, yet their bodily functions remain very much humane, thus making them vulnerable. Still, they seem to last longer than uninfected people, and if an infected somehow manages to survive for a long time, the anger worsens. Also, they follow a couple of rules. First, they don't attack one another, and second, their zeal to claw others kicks in only when they encounter primates. Birds, bees, dogs, sheep, they are not on the hit list. This theory was debunked in the later movie though. In the first two movies, the infected were either very sensitive to light, even a small flicker of candle can attract their attention. Mostly, they do not really need light, as we saw Dawn roaming around in a London underground in total darkness. Initially, they appear to be more comfortable in attacking at night, though they're not strictly nocturnal per se. We got a graphic novel 28 Days Later, The Aftermath in 2007, which records that the infected might use their sense of smell, which is heightened due to the virus, to find and attack uninfected people. Alright, so these were our original infected who pretty much set up the ground rules for the franchise. In 28 Years Later, released in 2025, the makers took their story up notch. We got variants and subsequently a little more insight into the lives of the infected. slow lows. The first type of infected that we get to see in the movie are the slow lows. They're clearly heavy, and I don't think Spike was wrong to call them the fat ones. However, it turns out the slow lows obesity is not self-created. It's probably a certain strain of the virus which affects them in a manner that causes an abnormal tissue congestion or swelling throughout their bodies, making them bloat up. The slow lows are hairless, which kind of adds on to their nasty appearance. Their mobility is restricted to crawling on the stomach at a very slow pace. Director Danny Boyle clarified that the slow lows do not waste their energy in walking or running. Instead, they save it to lower their nutritional requirements and survive on worms, grubs, and berries. When threatened, they can become bipedal and gain some speed, though it doesn't really count as running. The slow lows can either be alone or live with a unit of other such infected. Now, both these instances are shown in 28 years later. The one that Spike's mom, Isla, killed was alone, while the one that Spike killed as his first hunt alerted the others in the vicinity, who then started popping up like confetti. Spike's father taught him that a clean shot through their neck or heart can take out slow lows. However, when Isla killed one, she simply covered its face in a plastic bag and rammed it against the wall. Essentially, the slow lows are passive and are not an active threat to humans. They do not have a tendency to harm unless poked.
Come on, Mom!
Fast ones. I guess they had to go with his name because the Alien franchise already took the term runners. I don't really need to point out their strength. It's evident from their moniker that they were the Forrest Gumps of the infected lot. The fast ones are easily spotted in 28 Days Later. In fact, they are the most commonly seen variant in the movie. They are somewhat similar to the original infected ones, except that the fast ones actually care about food and water. Remember how I mentioned that the infected do not attack animals as such? Well, this hypothesis was nullified when we saw a group of fast ones tearing apart a deer and feeding on it. However, there is a system of hierarchy that works here, as in who hunts deer for the others to eat. Keep this in mind, I'll address it soon. Also, toward the end of the 28 years later movie, they snatched and ate the fish Spike was grilling, so yeah, these infected people do feel hunger. Another key difference between the fast ones and the original variants can be observed in their nature. They're not exactly empty-headed, rather the fast ones develop an animalistic tendency and form pack-like societies and consider mating as a priority. In a way, the fast ones are like an evolved version of the original strain. They also do not ooze blood as often as their predecessors, though the twitching is still evident. Some fans assume that Don Harris, owing to his smartness, caused this lineage of fast ones who portrays better brain functions, including having a sense of self-preservation. Hence, the society structure and breeding. Once again, Boyle's discussion makes the distinction between the fast ones and the original ones clearer. His vision was to bring about a change in how the infected ones act. In the first film, they would literally burn out and die in a frenzy. However, in the 2025 film, Boyle wanted to depict an evolution. The infected are no longer using so much energy to avoid malnutrition and quick deaths. Rather, they're trying to bypass that and also learn self-sustenance. Alphas. It's pretty clear now that the infected have created a kind of world for themselves, which is definitely stratified. It kind of mirrors how a pack of wolves function with the alpha at the topmost tier. Alphas are rare because the strain of rage virus that infects them acts as a constant supply of steroids, along with the standard symptoms. This justifies the greater aggression, towering height, stronger physique, and larger muscle mass. They are also way more resilient than the other types and cannot be easily killed by usual arrows. To kill an alpha, one would need something more powerful, like a flaming arrow, or probably showering him with bullets. Also, a combination of morphine and xylazine can sedate them. Alphas don't really exhibit prominent convulsions, ranking them above the fast ones and obviously the slow lows. So why did the infected choose an alpha to lead them? It's simple, they do not have any armaments, but they have to hunt. Thus, having someone to guide them and organize as a group, which by the way is an inherent human instinct, they put the alphas on top tier. Time to address the hunting pattern. The infected have their own system of showing reverence towards the alphas. It's them who kill an animal first for the others to feed on, kinda acting like the breadwinners for the pack. The alphas are also known as berserkers, and I guess it was a conscious choice to portray their resemblance to the ancient Norse warriors. The one we saw in 28 years later was given the name Samson by Dr. Kelson and was played by a 6'8" actor, Chi Lewis Parry. Anyway, there are more reasons as as to why the alphas are special. They portray higher cognitive function and problem-solving skills. Let's recall the scene where Samson could not break the iron covering of the underground bunker. He quickly broke into the place by breaking some planks of wood from what it appeared and attacked Kelson. So while they are overly hostile, the alphas also show patience and use their brain to use whatever they have as a tool. Samson used the dismembered part of a victim to hit another uninfected. The alphas used the fast ones as their foot soldiers, and Samson in particular showed a certain degree of regard for a fellow infected, the pregnant woman who just gave birth and was killed immediately after. He paused for a moment to examine her dead body before resuming his pursuit of Spike and Isla, and even after losing them, came back for the baby. The possible explanation is that the alphas might mate with infected women to procreate and continue the survival of the infected race, but it is not clear whether they form any sort of an emotional connection. Interestingly, the baby girl born to an infected mother and an alpha father was normal, but we know that's not how the infected's reproductive cycle works because we saw Spike and Jamie letting go of a slow, low child. That means something different happened to this child. The movie did not elaborate on it, but I have come across a couple of theories thanks to Reddit. Some argue that the baby was probably Jimmy's and the woman got pregnant before turning, or maybe Jimmy forced someone to sleep with an infected woman just to see how that would turn out. To support this argument, we even had the body of a man hanging upside down who was shot by Spike and his dad right when he started to turn. Other speculations involved that somehow the mother's oxytocin hormone, which is also known as the love hormone, protected the baby from being infected by the rage virus. However, if you notice carefully, the soundtrack playing in the train delivery sequence is called Alpha Baby. You can find it in the list of songs used, and that furthers my hunch. The baby is definitely Samson's, who went crazy to have her back. Though Samson might have turned the baby later, he clearly wanted to protect her and thus instinctively killed Eric, the soldier. The alpha kills are somewhat typical, with them twisting the victim's head and spine away. Yeah, I flinched. Okay, let's not get distracted. Given Samson was the father, the baby was still born uninfected, which brings us to the conclusion that Samson might have turned into an alpha only recently. Kelson said he has been hired for a couple of years, but did not specify whether he has been infected all along. Maybe the infected woman and Samson conceived that baby before either of them turned, and it did not happen long ago. This can be further strengthened if we take two things into account. One, the woman had some form of tattered clothes on her. Second, the alpha showed a shred of care at the woman's corpse, possibly because he was still newly infected and got glimpses of their life before, like Don Harris. Okay, let's move on from the baby girl, which is a little difficult because, God, was she adorable. The alphas are generally persistent chasers of their prey, and from what it appeared, they prefer killing rather than spreading the infection. Powers and weaknesses of the infected. We already figured that the infected might have a sense of smell from the extended lore of the franchise. Now, with 28 years later, it also became obvious that they can also hear others' infected screams and come in to join the effort. Remember the slow, low screech which alerted the others? The sound may either be due to pain or a deliberately designed mechanism to notify others that there is an uninfected person in the area. In any way, it's clear that they have a good sense of hearing. Moreover, we saw both Jamie and Dr. Kelson tried to be quiet while hiding from the infected and Samson respectively, which furthers this discovery. Comics and graphic novels also add to this. There we can find accounts that the infected are prone to picking up strange noises and attacking the source. Once the others hear the commotion, they immediately jump in. This might explain how the fast ones function. When one of them is killed, they don't shriek like the slow lows, but by the above-mentioned logic, they can discern unusual activities and rush in to the site of death to find the killer. Another skill they have is spatial awareness, at least to a certain degree. They've been shown to calculate complex routes to unseen targets and go through doors or windows. Yeah, it turns out they can navigate around obstacles better than me, who is a clumsy dodo, bumping on every possible piece of furniture. Ugh. The infected also show enough intelligence to stop continuously chasing their victims when they are out of reach. Rather, they focus on searching the target calmly. Curiously enough, they also have a sense of life and death. They are known to leave a victim if a person dies before one can pounce on them and turn. They do maul their prey to death sometimes, but with the evolution, the infected are showing better signs of self-restraint. They stop themselves from attacking an uninfected person any more than required and give them the incubation time for the virus to start working. That means somehow they figured it out, or probably an alpha taught them, that a dead person was no use to them and hence their entire attacking style had to be modified. Also, as I said, they prefer nighttime. It's not a restriction because in 28 years later, later, the infected could walk around and assault very well in broad daylight. I guess it's just a matter of choice, like we have about working remote or from the office. Jokes aside, it may also be an indication that the virus strain, which is prominently depicted in the 2025 movie, might have mutated to allow for discomfort in light. Now, they do have certain weaknesses and are by no means undefeatable. Their vulnerabilities, however, are a paradox. See, the infected can take blows without feeling any pain, and that helps them to keep their focus on the targets single-mindedly. However, it is these injuries which bring them down at the end of the day. Sure, they're numb to physical wounds, still the magnitude of the injury determines their mobility and strength. And it is these anatomical weaknesses that allow one to kill an infected. Next up, we have water acting as a barrier. Precisely how Holy Island was safe. They can run through shallow waters, but once the tide is in, they cannot swim and are caught by the current. Lastly, we have iodine. Unfortunately, since the people in the Holy Island banished Dr. Kelson, this piece of information was not circulated properly. Dr. Kelson mentioned that he covers himself in iodine because the infected does not like the reddish-orange appearance it provides, and thus acts as an excellent defense mechanism against him. Spike, you could have just sneaked this information into the letter. Apart from what Kelson said, I have my 2 cents to put in here. Iodine is known to have a pungent smell, and it's possible that it's the virus that repels the infected. However, the more plausible argument would be the color. The infected do not have a normal skin tone, and they themselves appear to be somewhat rusty in complexion. So the iodine's color may convince that the other person is an infected too, and as we know, they don't hunt their own. Also, the new movie, 28 years later, Bone Temple, has progressed Samson's story significantly. We can see him forming an uncanny, drug-based friendship with Dr. Kelson. He even starts recalling his past life in childhood and begins speaking. That, and you are in for a lot more surprises, but I'm not gonna spoil it for you. Alright guys, that's all for today. Absolutely love how the franchise is slowly adding layers to the infected narrative. The latest one might have given us an absolute answer to the end of all this chaos, yet we never know what the future holds. While I want to see the movie series growing, I don't want it to fall into the trap of Hollywood's franchise money-making. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.